I'm not a pundit. I don't know that. I'm just glad that he has refocused on these private sector jobs.
Yeah.
There was a group of us that met with him back in June, and that was my push for this innovation agenda. And I think that he inherited a nightmare. Everyone knows that. The month he came in, the country had lost more jobs in 1 month than the state of Vermont had people. And since then, things have stabilized, not as quickly as we want. And so he needed to sort of get out of that crisis mode and into the how do we expand private sector jobs mode. And I think he's making that transition, which is smart. And for me, as I said, this involves the education. It involves exports and how we, not just for big businesses, but small and medium-sized businesses, and there's great examples all over our state, and how we make the tax system and rules work so that we can really reward people that are expanding these private sector jobs in our country. Well, I think that's why you saw the president talking about investment in some areas in the short term, and he included in that, broadband, transportation, education.
Right.
So
hopefully
I think that you have to, and it's very easy to cut it down and say, how can you be talking about both things? Well, we have to, because we're still in this economic downturn with people out of work. So what you do to give them rockets, and I didn't really answer your question as well as I should have on the capital and the big companies, because what you do is you give the market and these companies faith that you are doing something structurally in the long term, which is going to help. And you look at what happened during the Clinton years when they made some of those changes with the tax reform and the difference that made. So you give them that faith in the long term, and in the short term, well, you don't go at nearly the pace I think that we were doing, and you look for waste and fraud and other things. There's still a bunch of medical fraud that goes on. You look for every way you can do to be fiscally conservative, and then at the same time you look, okay, what are some very clear areas that we want to make sure we continue to invest in or expand investment in. But to get that private sector money out there, which is really what's going to give us jobs, I think that's why I answered this with the deficit stuff. You have to show that we are in the long term getting our act together. You have to show that we've got the educated workforce to fill those jobs, all kinds of things like that. I really separate this discussion from the deficit, because I don't think we can be given them what's been going on in the COLA situation that we want to be balancing the budget in any way in the backs of seniors. We can't do that. But even if you look at that separately and say, okay, how can we adjust Social Security, not to save money to pay for something else, but to put it back into the Social Security system. Again, it's worth looking at the Deficit Commission report. I don't support everything in it, but I thought it had some ideas that are worth looking at. But again, it gets all messed up if people think about that as part of the deficit reduction. You have to think that as part of the putting the money back into Social Security so it stays solvent for longer. And I think that's worth talking about, but should run on a separate track. No, you guys can, you tell me, because I mean, she's done her work and she works hard.
You must know her fairly well, I would think.
I've worked with her on a few things. We had a big issue on the VA and getting some land for a bridge that we worked on together. So we haven't, we've worked together on a few things. So I don't know her that well.
Was that a surprise to you?
She did. That was actually Al's thing. Yes, we did the cook-off. And my recipe.
Did you bring your recipe?
No, I think hers looked very good. I didn't try it, but it was the venison sausage.
Senator.
She made a good hot dish. There you go. Well, I think first of all, my previous job was more of a management job, and it was the luxury of deciding you wanted to do something and getting a few police chiefs to agree, and then it happened. This job, you learn that you have to really think about the motivations of other people that you're working with, and look for that common ground and those good motivations, no matter how much you disagree with other people on other things. And I think that's been the secret to getting a lot of these things done, is looking for that. And I have tried, as you can see, to look for the good in everyone, and tried to make that my focus beyond helping Minnesota. I think the other thing that was very difficult, but ended up strengthening our office, is when I was the only senator for 9 months. that was kind of a seminal moment. And we really beefed up our constituent service work in terms of just the volume of things coming in. Well, first of all, we just ended the election in Minnesota, like, 2 months ago? And I really, while you're always in my job, you have to always keep an eye and know what you're doing,
Right.
and think about that you have to, raise money in a Senate race. It's like $10 million. I think that's what it was last time. But other than that, I have just really focused on my job, and that's what people in Minnesota want. They want an elected official who's going to do their work, instead of just thinking ahead to the next election. So that's what I'm doing right now, and I'll just continue doing that work. And I really promise you that people hardly ever ask about it. Very rarely, except when there's reports someone isn't running or something, because they are still asking about jobs and the economy and the issues, and that's where we should be introduced.